Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote-unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp, and those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, here we go, folks. Another day, another bike lane discussion, I'm sure. Halifax Regional Council defeated the motion to pause the construction of new bike lanes in the municipality after a lengthy debate. At its meeting yesterday, Council voted 12-5 against Mayor Andy Fillmore's motion. The mayor will join us tomorrow, by the way, in studio, or I'm not sure in studio, no, it would be via phone, at about 10:45 to talk about this, and we'll get his take on this. During the debate, District 9 Councillor Sean Cleary, no surprise, opposed the motion, said he was not convinced bike lanes were solely responsible for traffic congestion. Nancy Hartling also voted against the suggestion that the motion lacked, saying that the motion rather lacked supporting data. All right, folks, so I'm gonna ask you the question. What do you think about this? I think, first of all, the motion was a little convoluted and conflated when it comes to a couple of key issues. One being congestion and planning, and the other being cost. And to me, I think that it would have been a stronger motion if it would have simply read, the concern is cost escalation and priority of spending of council. Are the costs spiraling out of control? And I think that the answer is pretty clear that they are. And by introducing the idea that it's congestion, causing congestion, without data really backing that up, I think you're just giving ammunition to those who support it, who support bike lanes, no matter what, ammunition. And that's what it did. I think that the argument here, the fundamental argument is this something that we need to press pause because of the cost? Originally, it was supposed to be $25 million and mostly funded by the federal government. I think some provincial money as well, but I think primarily the feds. And that was the argument, right? Free money. Why not do it? It's free money. But now that it's $100 million and that number is going to do nothing but go up, without contributing dollars, at least not yet, from the feds to match any of that overture, I think that, to me, is the key component or should have been the key component to the motion. Is it worth it right now? And do you need to press pause on this when it comes to the procurement and the tendering process? And let's look at the tendering process. How many tenders are submitted? How many companies are bidding on this work? How patchwork is the bidding? How much continuity is there when it comes to the tenders? To me, the finances is the number one concern that I have with this, and the priority. Should this be a priority right now when we have so many other issues in the city, like crumbling infrastructure, like other recreational facilities that are deteriorating? I mean, or grass cutting. You drive down Dunbrack and you look at the median in Dunbrack. It's an embarrassment, folks. It's a hayfield. It's an absolute embarrassment, in my opinion. I mean, I come from the city of St. John, as many of you know, and St. John's got a bad reputation of being a bit of a dump. I'll just call it as it is. It's an industrial city. It's a blue-collar city. And by the way, St. John, if you've not been there in a number of years, has done a lot of work to their waterfront. It's really come a long way. But it's still a blue-collar town. It's got a bit of a grit, but I can guarantee you this. that it doesn't have any of that embarrassing hayfields in the medians. And look, folks, to me, it's a priority. Is it a priority item? And how many people are using the bikes, are riding bicycles? Now cyclists converged at City Hall yesterday. And look, I'm not suggesting that nobody's going to drive bikes or nobody cycles or any of that stuff. Like, let's avoid the hyperbole here. But do the numbers warrant the investment? And we're talking year round as well, right? Like, because we have 8-9 months of pretty inclement weather here in Nova Scotia. And some of that is downright intolerable when it comes to riding bikes for most people. Most people aren't going to drive a bike between November and April, let's face it. Certainly not in the throes of winter. So this is something that I want you to weigh in on. What are your thoughts on this? Did council make the right decision, or did they get it wrong? And again, I want to hear from all of you, all perspectives, all points of view, regardless of where you fall on this. And is the real concern the soaring cost? And when does cost finally factor in? Because it hasn't factored in at $100 million. So would it be $150 million? Would it be $200 million? And I believe that probably the majority of council, there's no number that it could soar to that would make them press pause on this project for whatever reason. And first and foremost, you need to be fiscal stewards of the purse and of taxpayers' money, folks. That to me is priority one of any council. And I don't think that this council gets that. I really don't. So these are some of the things that I want you to talk about when we open the phone lines between noon and 1 today. It's a Wednesday. That means house calls with Dr. John Gillis. It goes between 11 and 12. We'll take your health-related questions and concerns. Dr. Gillis, always great, always willing to give you his advice on the phone. How about those Blue Jays? The surging Toronto Blue Jays aiming to sweep the St. Louis Cardinals this afternoon when the teams wrap up for the 3-game series. The Jays beat the Cards 5-4 yesterday, edged them 10-9. The Jays sitting second in the AL East, just 4 games back of my New York Yankees and 1 game up on the Tampa Bay Rays, who have won 7 of 9. So suddenly the American League East is becoming a lot more competitive than it was earlier in the season, but that's what happens. Baseball is a 162-game series or season, and it's a long haul and a lot can happen. But it's not going to be easy in the AL East this year, and that's good for baseball. It's good for the Jays for sure. It's good for Rogers also, owner of course, the Blue Jays and this radio station. I'm still not a Jays fan, though. Anyway, nonetheless, we shall see. But the surging Blue Jays doing not bad at all. So thanks for tuning in and listening, folks. We appreciate it very much. All right, this story we're following up on an interview that I had with Bette El-hawary earlier, I think a couple months ago now, the executive director of Swim Nova Scotia. Bette joins the show again. Bette, how are you?
Hi, Todd. I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm fine. So this story I saw in the Chronicle Herald this week, Swim Nova Scotia is extending an olive branch to Acadia University in hopes of staving off the June 15th pool closure. So for those who don't know the background, if you will, just paint the picture of where we're at to this point and how we got here.
Well, in early February, Acadia University made the announcement that they would be closing the pool doors on June 15th, and that came with no consultation with the community or Swim Nova Scotia or any of their key stakeholders, which has been very disappointing. We did have some dialogue with them through the month of February. Early March, they did make public their engineering reports. However, since that time, we've had no response from them, and we have continued to extend that olive branch to work collaboratively to find a short-term solution to keep the pool open just a little bit longer until a new facility is available to that community. And unfortunately, pretty much 3 months went by and we had no response from Acadia University until yesterday, where they, reached out and responded to one of my emails and said, we're declining to meet with you, and we're planning to close the doors on June 15th, which is, it's very disheartening that they couldn't take the time to do any collaboration. on the state of the facility and work to finding a short-term solution. So we're very disappointed in that institution right now.
All right, so you had a town hall meeting on June 3rd, which was well attended. Tell us about that.
The town hall took place in Wolfville, and we also had a virtual option. So we had just over 100 people from the local community join us in person, along with about 50 to 60 people online. Very well received. We provided an opportunity for the community to ask questions and share their concerns and potential solutions or suggestions to keeping the facility open short term. And we also were able to provide the local community with our thoughts on how we felt we could try to work with Acadia and keep the facility open short term.
Okay, so you mentioned that there might be another option in the works. What other options are there for a pool? Well,
it's definitely not anything in the short term, but on the horizon is a new facility for the Wolfville community and Kings County. The municipality and the community have been working closely together for the last number of years to build a new recreation facility. So not only a swimming pool, but a recreation complex for that community. So I believe that, that will come to fruition in a couple of years. But, I think they're trying to finalize the location and who that advocate would be to oversee the building of the facility.
Okay, so the issue with the pool at Acadia is just simply is the age, built in the 60s, and the 6-lane pool is just worn out its lifespan. That's basically it, is it?
Well, there's no evidence to support that in the engineering reports that we have seen. To keep the facility open forever, yes, there are some key items that need to be done. Renovations would be for a long term, keeping the pool open for another 10 to 20 years. But we haven't seen any evidence of keeping it open short term, what that looks like. And that's why we were hoping to work with Acadia University to have what's called a state of good repair assessment. And that would be done by associates who are specialists in that area and in constructing pools. They work closely with engineering companies. They also do work very closely with DEI Engineering, who was the engineering company that Acadia has been working with. And what they do is they look at what are short-term solutions, what are priority items, and primarily that would be safety items that need to be addressed to keep the pool open short-term. But based on the engineering reports, we've seen no evidence of the structural integrity of that tank. So that remains an asset in the community. The pool itself can still operate for short-term. And that's why we wanted to have the state of good repair take place so we could have a better understanding of what short-term solutions are required to keeping it open safely.
Any idea what the cost might be and who might incur those costs to keep it open short-term?
Well, first we have to have the state of good repair done, and Swim Nova Scotia was willing to pay for the cost of that. Once we have that, we would be able to determine and prioritize what items have to be done in the short term, maybe over keeping the pool open for 1 year or 3 years. And once we have those costs, we would be able to work with the community and the different levels of government to be able to support some financing to make those projects come to fruition, just to keep the pool open short term. But again, we have no idea what those short-term requirements are. That's not available in the engineering report that we received.
Okay, so tell us about the hole this leaves when it comes to a facility for user groups.
The new one?
No, having the pool close.
Oh, having the pool closed. Well, yeah. I mean, it's detrimental to the community. There's, not going to be swimming lessons for the youth coming up in that community, which you look at that Wolfville and surrounding areas, the number of lakes and water sources around there, which, to me is devastating. You're going to have, however many years, potentially 5 years of kids not learning how to swim. We have a lot of displaced seniors that use the Acadia pool for their daily exercise and rehabilitation. Also doing the SMILE program. So we've got a lot of displaced youth through that program that don't have any other options. And then we also have our swim teams that no longer have any options. The Wolfville Tritons, it's a club of 150 swimmers and volunteers and coaches that are also going to be displaced. So, it's a huge loss for that community to no longer have access to a pool, because they don't have a pool in that community that's accessible all year. So that's what we find very concerning.
Have you asked any politicians for their help?
We have, yes. We have been talking to the provincial MLAs in that community. We've been talking to the municipal councillors and the mayors. At this time, they're not interested in trying to have Acadia be a short-term solution. They're focusing on a long-term new recreation facility, which is great, but I do think it's a bit short-sighted of them in terms of not making sure that the community is looked after for the next, 3 to 5 years.
So it doesn't appear as though that the university is going to enter any dialogue. So is there anything else you can do about this, or is the fight over?
Well, we're going to continue to advocate. I'll continue to extend the olive branch to Acadia to meet with them, because I do think there's viable opportunities to keep the pool open. Hopefully they'll come around. But we're also shifting focus as well. Swim Nova Scotia is working very closely with the Recreation Facilities Association Nova Scotia. We've started an aquatic feasibility study trying to determine the number of pools that we have in the city, the ages of them, how well they're maintained, their accessibility. And we're going to present that report to the province so they have a better idea of our aging infrastructure, because we don't want to find out how we found out about Acadia, that they can't sustain and they're closing their doors. It's important to us to be able to have that information in advance and share that with the province and those municipalities to plan ahead and make sure that every community in the province is well serviced and has access to a pool.
Okay, Betty, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bette El-hawary, Executive Director of Swim Nova Scotia. Dalhousie University study examines how rise in discrimination, harmful rhetoric targeting 2S LGBTQ plus people is affecting their mental health. This when we come back. Researchers at Dalhousie University launching a study to better understand the mental health of 2S LGBTQ plus people in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, and how an apparent rise in discrimination and harmful rhetoric may be affecting them. Joining us to discuss all this is Patrick Hickey, a PhD candidate in Dallas Department of Psychology and Neuroscience. Patrick, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
No, of course. Happy to be here.
All right. So this is all, or a lot of it's in connection with what's happening in the United States and Donald Trump and his administration, correct?
Yeah, a lot of what we've been hearing from, community organizations on the ground and kind of in the community is a lot from the U.S., but also kind of, some of the things and the rhetoric that's been going on in Canada as well.
How much anecdotally is that filtering into Canada or having influence here north of the border, what's happening in the United States?
Yeah, it's obviously a hard thing to measure, but I think everyone kind of knows from the relationship that we have with, the close ties we have with the U.S., it makes sense that a lot of people in our communities here would be hearing about it, and it would, have a big impact on members of the community.
All right, tell us about the survey and the work that you're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we recently completed interviews with different LGBTQ community organizations across both New Brunswick and Nova Scotia to kind of get a better sense of what they feel is happening, what they feel the biggest concerns are, what they find community members are doing to protect their mental health and well-being. And so the next part of that study is really the survey that's going on right now, which is open to anyone who identifies as a member of the LGBTQ community in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick and is 18 or older. And it really is to get a better sense of, people's experience with discrimination, how it's impacting mental health, and also what are some of the protective factors like connectedness to community and those kind of things that might be really helpful at protecting our mental health and well-being from this, rise in discrimination, hate crimes, rhetoric, and all these kind of things that can be impacting it.
All right. What are some of the questions that you're asking?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're asking about people's mental health, so lots of different measures of mental health and well-being. We're asking about experiences of discrimination. So, how regularly you might experience discrimination, where are the places that you might experience discrimination, and also how it's impacted your life. Have you had to take, changes to safety precautions? Have you had to move or change jobs or those kind of things? And then a really important focus of the survey too is what are those more like positive things that we are able to capture that people are doing to protect their mental health or to find, mental well-being. And so things like, do you find support from your family and friends, or find support from your connectedness to the LGBTQ community? Where are the places that you feel safe, supported, and that, your identity is affirmed. And so we're trying to hope to capture that so we can, gain a better understanding and hopefully come out with some useful results for the community.
Once you have the data, what do you plan to do with it?
Yeah, so a part of this, really the next step after, is that people are able to sign up for a more in-depth interview if they're interested, and we want to go in to kind of do more in-depth conversations with community members in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick to get a better sense of, okay, exactly how is, discrimination or your experiences with discrimination impacting your day-to-day life? And what are the things that you find help, protect your mental health? And so we want to kind of do that work to get an even bigger understanding, a deeper understanding. And then hopefully we can put this together and bring this back to the community. So bring it back to community organizations, community groups, individuals, leaders in the community, and, understand how this might be helpful to inform, the work that we might be able to do.
All right, I noticed this story. The Prime Minister Mark Carney joined members of Parliament from all parties yesterday raising the Pride flag in Ottawa. In his remarks on Parliament Hill, Carney said Pride is both a celebration of how love is already won and a promise to ensure that everyone's rights are protected. That is obviously something that is very positive, and I'm sure that is a good gesture, right? To say the very least.
Yeah, of course. It's important to have support from governments and from our legislators, but it's also important that those statements and those words are continued with action and with measures that can help protect community members from discrimination, this rhetoric, and also support access to things like mental health care as well. And so absolutely, it's great to hear those things. And of course, we'll keep watching as we see that with continued action too.
Okay, so people want to know more about this or they want to participate in the survey. How do they do so?
Yeah, absolutely. So really the best way that people can find the survey, it's posted through a lot of different community groups that we're working with, but people can search our lab website, our research lab website, which is if you just search the Nature and Wellness Lab at Dow, you can find our website and it has all the information and the links to the survey.
Okay, appreciate it. And thank you, and we'll talk again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time.
All right, take care. Patrick Hickey, PhD candidate in Dallas Department of Psychology and Neuroscience. Again, a reminder, we will open the phone lines today between noon and 1. And already we're receiving some emails from people commenting on the fact that the mayor's motion to press pause on bike lane construction was defeated yesterday, and getting, I'm sure, lots of feedback on that as the day goes on. And I'm sure that some of you will want to talk about that again when we open the phone lines between noon and 1 today. And a reminder, Dr. John Gillis House Calls goes between 11 and 12 today, it being a Wednesday. When we come back, Canadians want spending cuts, according to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation polling. Franco Terrazzano when we return. Right, joining us for a chat is Franco Terrazzano, Canadian Taxpayers Federation Federal Director. Franco, thanks for joining the show as always.
Hey, Todd, thanks for having me on today.
All right, so according to some polling, Canadians want some spending cuts. That's the skinny of it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, this was a Leger poll, and it just asked Canadians, like, hey, what do you want to see the federal government do over the next 4 years? People had an option of, say, cut spending, maintain spending, or increase it. And by a pretty wide margin here, Canadians are saying reduce spending. You had 45% say reduce spending, 20% said increase, 19% said maintain. You remove the undecideds, and more than half of Canadians, so most of Canadians, want the federal government in Ottawa to cut spending. And Todd, you know, for your listeners out on the East Coast there, Atlantic Canadians were one of the highest supporting spending cuts. You had Quebec, Alberta, and then Atlantic Canada among the Canadians who want the federal government to most cut federal spending.
All right, so governments have been talking about cutting spending now for more than a decade, and it's been nothing but the opposite of that. So at some point, people, I would think, would lose faith in promises from government.
Well, you know, I hear you on that sometimes, right? And I get frustrated with that as well. I mean, look, we now have a young government, I guess you can kind of say, under Carney, right? He just became the prime minister. But already you see him going in that same direction of borrowing more money on the government credit card, more debt for Canadians' kids and grandkids to pay back, right? During the election, Mr. Carney, he said he would rein in spending. But if you look at the government's first main spending plans of the year, well, they're increasing spending again, 8% this year, up to almost $500 billion. 80% of federal government departments and agencies are getting more money from taxpayers this year. In fact, there's like 26 federal departments and agencies that are going to get more than 20% more from taxpayers in 1 year alone.
Okay, are there some exceptions, like the military spending on 2% of GDP? Might that be an exception when it comes to spending?
Well, this is a big spending increase, right? It's about $9 billion, $10 billion a year. Yeah. But, you know, here's the thing. I think people have a right to I just ask a simple question. Like, how are you going to pay for this? You know what I mean? Like, how are you going to – because that's a lot of money, right? $10 billion of defense spending. How are you going to pay for this? Are you going to increase taxes? Are you going to put more money on the credit card, you know, more debt, kick the can down the road for Canadians' kids and grandkids to pay back? Or are you going to cut spending elsewhere in the budget? Like, I think these are valid questions that Canadians have. And Todd, to a recent conversation that you and I had, I think this is all more reason why Canadians need to see a federal budget.
Yeah. Do you have concerns that Mark Carney, although he has a strong pedigree as a banker, we know his pedigree, I don't need to repeat it or remind people, but the surrounding cast of characters are largely the same, with some exceptions, when it comes to cabinet, and we know that the track record of that previous government was bad when it comes to spending. Does that concern you?
Oh, it does. It really does. And, you know, not to repeat history here, but remember, under Trudeau, a lot of the ministers, the same as Carney, they doubled the national debt in less than 10 years, right? Like, we're talking about Canadians' kids and grandkids making payments on that debt for the rest of their lives. I mean, even look today, where interest charges on the debt are costing taxpayers $1 billion every single week, which essentially means that's a brand new hospital every week that is not getting built because our money is going to the bond fund managers on Bay Street just to pay interest on that debt. But, you know, Todd, it's not just the surrounding cast of ministers that worries me. What worries me is actually the few financial documents that Carney has presented. I mentioned the main estimates, the main spending plan that was tabled. It's already an 8-9% increase over last year, right? And also to Carney's own platform, you know, these aren't my numbers. These were numbers in the Liberal Party's platform. We're looking at an extra $225 billion of debt over the next 4 years. And, you know, as bad as Trudeau was when it comes to piling up debt, That's about $100 billion more debt than even Trudeau was planning to add.
Yeah, for sure. The Auditor General reported yesterday, speaking of military spending, the F-35 costs are spiraling out of control, concluded that the costs associated with the F-35 jet program running $8.7 billion higher than the original estimates. And you know that is going to do nothing but go up. So that this kind of dovetails into our conversation in particular about military spending.
Yeah, it does. And I'm concerned about that too, And I guess, hey, that's one way to reach 2% of GDP.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Just let that program spiral out of control and we'll take care of that in a hurry, right?
Yeah, exactly. But, I'm kind of being tongue-in-cheek right now. But, I am actually very concerned with governments being like, here's a target that we have to hit. And I worry that people say, oh, it's good if you hit some target. But, it's only in government where success is measured by how much something costs rather than actual outcomes. You know what I mean, Todd?
I do, yeah.
Let me just give you an example, right? Like if I'm like, hey, I'm going to build this house and it's going to cost $5 million. Well, that doesn't say anything about how good the actual house is, how good that money is actually spent. It's just telling me how much it's going to cost.
Exactly. Spending for the sake of spending money is not the solution. Karen Hogan, the AG, also looked at the security rules awarding contracts to the company behind the controversial ArriveCan app. This is a staggering story that I can't believe has not received more scandal than it has. The audit of GC Strategies found the company was awarded 106 contracts by 31 federal organizations between 2015 and 2024. The maximum value of those contracts was more than $90 million. Only $65 million was paid out. The report says many contracts did not follow procurement rules. Organizations often provided little evidence to show the work had actually been done. And the report says that for half the contracts that required security clearances, federal organizations weren't able to show that those doing the work had the appropriate clearances before the contract was awarded. And nobody, not one person, Franco, to my knowledge, has been reprimanded or lost a job over this. Unbelievable.
Todd, it's even worse than that, right? We uncovered some documents, some internal government documents that actually showed that the government executives who are overseeing the ArriveCan app, right? That boondoggle it started at $80,000. It eventually ended up costing taxpayers $60 million. Well, the government's own documents that we uncovered showed that the government executives, right, working or overseeing that ArriveCan app took $340,000 in bonuses.
Wow.
So it's like, It's not even like the lack of reprimanding or accountability. It's the fact that they were rewarded for massive failure with our tax dollars, right? That's crazy. And hey, Todd, let me just point one other thing out from that Auditor General's report that really stuck out to me. The Auditor General mentioned that federal organization made payments to this company without evidence showing that all deliverables were received, right? Like in nearly half of the contracts that the Auditor General examined, well, federal organizations had little to no evidence to support that the deliverables, the work was actually received. So it's like, what are we paying all this money for?
Yeah. It's just staggering. Why do you think that we're becoming desensitized to this as a populace?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I'm not really sure, right? Because there's so much, spending scandals, so much waste that is coming out all the time. So it's really hard to say. One thing that I will say, a little optimism, because I know I've been a bit of a rain cloud today on your show, but a little bit of optimism is that, at least all the major parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives running in the last platform, at least they felt the need to pay lip service to cutting wasteful spending and also to cutting taxes. So, they at least felt the political pressure that they, at the very least, had to pay lip service to reining in federal wasteful spending and also to cut taxes.
Yeah, for sure. But again, I just, when you talk about debt and we get into billions and billions of dollars, I just think that people hear those numbers and $9 billion more for military procurement and $1 billion a week for servicing debt, and I think people kind of glaze over at some point and just think, oh, what the hell, government will cut the check no matter what. This won't affect me in my life. I think that there's this attitude of indifference that exists out there.
I do worry about that a little bit. And to really break down the numbers, we're talking about these huge debt numbers. Well, think about it this way, okay? So a baby born today, she's already on the hook for about $30,000 in federal government debt, right? So that's a $30,000 government debt bill from Ottawa alone that is being left to essentially everyone born today, your kids, your grandkids, that they're going to have to pay back unless somebody in Ottawa actually, rolls up their sleeves and gets to work here trying to find ways to save people money. But Todd, one other thing I'll say, and we saw this in the 90s across the provinces, across political parties, even at the federal Liberal, things got so bad where interest payments were costing so much for the federal government to actually borrow money that you saw political parties across the provinces, across the federal government, they were forced to actually cut spending and cut spending big time, right? Even the NDP in Saskatchewan were forced to close, dozens of rural hospitals across that province. So at the end of the day, either the politicians actually make some tough decisions today, or even worse decisions are going to be forced on them tomorrow.
Yeah, and especially with economic uncertainty, is the order of the day with tariffs and what's happening with the United States, looking to diversify markets. That's not going to happen in a hurry. So I think that this would be a time for fiscal prudence, big time. But I don't know that this government gets that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, well, I couldn't agree more that it's, with everything going on in the world, we do have to ask ourselves, there's things that we can control and there's things that we can't control, right? Look, we can't control what President Trump does tomorrow. Okay, we just can't. What we can control is how much our own governments are spending, how much your own governments are taxing, and what type of roadblocks our governments in Canada are putting up to economic development. And I just couldn't agree more that especially in this time of uncertainty internationally, we really do have to look inward and ask ourselves and focus on how can we make Canada the best place in the country to work, to raise a family, and then also just to encourage entrepreneurship here so that we have jobs, we have the tax revenue, and we have the investment in Canada.
Franco, appreciate it as always. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you, Todd. Have a great day.
All right, take care. Franco Terrazzano, Canadian Taxpayers Federation Federal Director. Elder financial abuse and AI scams and the great wealth transfer. We're going to discuss this when we come back. As World Elder Abuse Awareness Day approaches June 15th, we're chatting with Larry Zelvin, head of BMO Financial Crimes Unit, for his commentary as one of the fastest growing forms of elder abuse, financial exploitation. Larry Zelvin joins us. Larry, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Todd. Great being here with you and your listeners.
All right. It's unfortunate that we have to talk about this issue, but it's the reality, right?
No, it absolutely is. Look, according to Canadian government sources, fraud is the number one crime against older Canadians. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre just recently put out a statistic that said Canadians were losing about $638 million to fraud in 2024, and that it surpassed $2 billion since 2021. I'll tell you, just as a comparison, in the U.S., the Federal Trade Commission there said that there was $158 billion with a B in fraud losses in 2023 alone, and $61.5 billion of that came from people over 60.
Where are these scams coming from?
Yeah, look, they're coming from all over the place, and a lot of it's coming from overseas, but we don't want to diminish that. In some cases, it's actually coming in from North America. They're going after money the old-fashioned way. They're stealing it. And look, the elderly population, look, everybody's vulnerable, but, why elder more so than anyone else? And look, a lot of that has to do that, unfortunately, as people get older, they become isolated. Their family moves on. They may have a death. So there's a tendency to want to connect. So when somebody's nice or, is telling them about something, they're a little bit more prone to do that. People who are older sometimes are more trusting in nature. Look, they've also accumulated wealth. So a lot of folks, it's estimated that over $100 trillion in Canadian dollars is expected to shift from baby boomers to Gen X and millennials by 2045. So they have a lot of money. The last thing I'll say is that unfortunately some older folks are also less digitally confident, so that makes them more prone to these scams.
All right. What are some of the more prominent scams right now?
So, there are things that like grandparent or family crises. I will tell you it happened in my own family. My son was in school in Edinburgh, Scotland. My father-in-law got a call, said he was in an accident and needed money immediately, so my father-in-law did so. When he got a second call, he realized it was fraud and then called me, even though he knew I work in security. I will tell you that these things happen all the time. And because of AI, artificial intelligence, it's now, when my father-in-law got called, it was by a complete stranger. But with AI, it may actually sound like your loved one. It may sound like somebody you care. So it's becoming even more difficult. Two other really quick if I can. The other ones are like dating and romance schemes. So somebody approaches folks online, starts a relationship that is friendly, then becomes more romantic, and then actually steals money. And then the last thing I'll mention is cryptocurrency. I will tell you, I talked to somebody recently, $3 million, their entire life savings was given to this cryptocurrency scheme, and they were actually going to go out and get a loan for even more money. So I've got a lot of bad stories, but these are top three.
My gosh. So how does the AI get somebody's voice?
So, Todd, I'm sorry to tell you, it takes all of about 2 seconds. So somebody could just go, hi, like, hi, can I help you? Oh, I'm sorry, wrong number. That's enough.
Whoa.
So if somebody's really targeting you, and here's something, they can build an entire conversation. Usually, not too long ago, they would need video in order to do a realistic video representation. But there's new AI that if they have a picture of you, they're able to create at least now a crude or somewhat credible video of you as well. So it's just becoming more and more complicated.
So somebody may say, I'll contact you via Skype, and it would look exactly like the person and sound like them.
Correct. And in many cases, you can just do it audio. So, if you're talking like where I'm most vulnerable, like many people, I think, is my children. So if my daughter or my sons gave me a call and they said they were in trouble, oh my gosh, I would just react. Yeah. They know that. And the same thing could go for a spouse, a partner, people that you're incredibly fond of, love, if you will. If they're an extremist, your default is, gosh, is this real or not? Or more likely your response is, let me help. And that's where the fraudsters are getting the advantage.
So this must make life very difficult for legitimate banking industry, I would think, because as people become more aware of these scams, they'll become less likely to participate in calls. So what tips do you give people when it comes to safeguarding yourself? Because there is legitimate business that is done sometimes, and there are times when banks and financial institutions do require your attention. So what advice do you give people?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Like the crypto scam, the gentleman who I was involved in thought he was going to get 80-90% return on his investment. Folks, there's nothing that's going to give you that kind of return, especially as quickly. So sounds too good to be true, it probably isn't. Second, if it's a family member that is saying they're an extremist, see if you can find something and ask them a question that only they would know, something you couldn't find on the internet, like what was their favorite child's toy or who was their best friend growing up. Unfortunately, we're getting to that point where you're going to have to ask those questions and just not assume. But Todd, look, the biggest advice I have for your listeners is slow down. They really create a sense of urgency. They really give you a sense of immediacy. Folks, slow down. If need be, go ask a trusted partner, friend, call your financial institution, say, hey, is this right? Is this legitimate? But you're going to have to be more discriminating. But I couldn't agree more. Not everything is a fraud, but you need to be more suspicious now, probably more so than you've ever been.
Yeah, and you mentioned the unreported side of it because people are embarrassed, right?
Well, look, there are some industry statistics that say that only 5 to 10% of fraud victims actually report these crimes.
Wow.
Folks, I would encourage you to do so. Canadian Bankers Association, Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, local law enforcement, the folks you do business with, banking with, finance with, hopefully it's BMO's shameless plug. But at the end of the day, please do report it. Now, with the elderly population, I will tell you it becomes harder because, unfortunately, they are often double victimized. So they've had the fraud, and then they're afraid to tell their loved ones because they think they're going to be yelled at or shamed. And they're like, you know what? I've already lost money. I don't need people yelling at me. Look, they're victims. Just like if their car had been stolen or if their house had been broken into, it's the same. Don't hold them accountable. Listen to them, be empathetic, and solve the problem together.
That also speaks to the benefit of having a bricks and mortar establishment and a place where people can go, right, to see a face, and not to dissuade people from virtual banking. People can do what they will, obviously, or you can have a hybrid. But look, if you've got a location where you can go into and talk to somebody, that is your number one fail-proof.
It's not fail-proof, but it's better because, look, frauds existed probably as long as banks and financial transactions have been happening, but you had to be physically present. I will tell you, Todd, that honestly, some of the online stuff probably makes you less prone to fraud as long as you're using the legitimate websites and applications, right? Because we have fraud controls that large corporations use, and also some small and medium-sized, to be fair, but there's better accountability there. But I think what you need to be very careful of is you really, before you send money, before you share you should never share your username and password. You should never share a PIN that has been given to you. These are all things that fraudsters do. So do know that there's legitimate actions and illegitimate actions, and make sure you can discern between the two.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is somebody's calling you and you're concerned that they're not who they are or they're not representing who they are. And if you can go to a bank and you can actually go into the bank and talk to the teller or somebody there, to me that is foolproof, is it not?
It is, as long as, yes, you're right in that regard. I think from a bank's perspective, we've had people walk in who are not actually your customers. But look, if you're an actual customer, you can go to a branch and go, look, they called me. They asked, can you help me? That absolutely is the best way to proceed.
Yeah, for sure. It's unfortunate we have to have these conversations, Larry, but I think that if we can save one person today from being impacted by this, then it's worth it. So thank you for doing this.
Couldn't agree more, Todd. Look, folks, hopefully we didn't scare you. Hopefully we informed you, but best of luck, and thank you very much for having me.
Okay, take care. Larry Zelvin, head of BMO Financial Crimes Unit. And it just astounds me how much scamming is going on in the world today. We talk about it seemingly daily on this show. But look, folks, it's just the reality of it. And we do our best to try and inform you and inform us and learn as we go along to try and save as many of you from this type of scam as possible. It's just sad that we've arrived at a time when you can basically trust nobody. And we shall see where it all goes in the future. I mean, avatars at some point will begin. That'll be, God knows when that'll start. Anyway, I could go on all day about this. It irritates me how dishonest people are and how people can live with themselves, operating in such a way. I have no idea why anybody could get up in the morning and live with themselves. Anyway, House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. If you have a health-related question or concern, give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. House Calls when we come back. All right, it's time for House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. If you have a health-related question or concern, give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. If you have a health-related question or concern, again, 902-405-6000. Dr. Gillis, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time as always.
All right, my friend.
I'm okay. You?
Doing well.
Excellent. What about the Edmonton Oilers? That looked like the Leafs.
Yeah, I thought maybe Mitch Marner did a spirit swap with McJesus, and that's what's going on.
Yeah, but, I know.
Yeah, it's hard to know.
Big confidence hit though for the Oilers, but they'll need a big rebound. But anyway, nonetheless, we shall see. Florida's just that good, right? I mean, Florida is just an unbelievable hockey team. That is pretty evident.
Yeah, and they brought in the right veterans. Marchand continues to own everybody in the playoffs. I mean, you look at his stats in the playoffs all time. He's top of almost every category, which is crazy. But kudos to him. For sure. Okay, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for House Calls with Dr. Gillis. If you have a health-related question or concern, give us a buzz, 902-405-6000. How have things been busy at the Dartmouth ER? I assume they have been, as usual. Yeah, I'm back there tonight, so hopefully maybe the good weather will, keep people happy at home, but probably not. So.
Yeah, for sure. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. 6,000. Let's see. Where do I want to start here? A few things in the news cycle that caught my attention. This one first, while we await some calls. Again, 902-405-6000. I read this on the CBC website. The headline, Influenza now killing more Nova Scotians than COVID-19. This is what we'd expect as we return to more of a normal respiratory virus season. That according to your good friend, Dr. Robert Strang. So no surprises. Any comments? What are your thoughts on this, Dr. Gillis? To be expected?
Yeah, it's the way it always has been. Influenza kills a lot of people, older folks with medical problems, and we're seeing it again. It's good that COVID is not, but the story remains the same. Please get immunized if you can against anything you can, particularly for older folks.
Yeah, for sure. And there is a vaccine. We've talked about this on the show many times, but there is a vaccine fatigue out there. But that said,
sorry about that. Lost you for a second there.
That's okay. But there is a vaccine fatigue out there. But the viruses and the illnesses and the germs don't know about that. They don't care about that, right? That doesn't. They're not going to take a holiday just because we do.
No, that's it. And it's vaccines, it's washing your hands, it's staying home if you're sick. All the things that we hope people will do. And there is fatigue out there, but and again, we also see people who. And we never want to discourage people who are sick from coming in, but we do unfortunately see a lot of people, who have, what I would call a minor viral illness who, get very frustrated when they've been there for hours and get told there's nothing we can do for them. They don't need antibiotics and they've got a virus and their oxygen's fine. So they get a little bit frustrated. So.
And who's most vulnerable to this? Obviously, people with immune compromised, but elderly. Who should be the most safeguarded against this?
Just people that are older, that have other medical problems, that have previously noted respiratory problems, all those things. And because we still see it, people don't necessarily realize it, but there are people that still die from influenza. They're mostly older and sick. And, we do our very best to prevent these things, but it still happens. So we just need to be vigilant about it. Any tips on when you should go to the ER or when you should not? Or I suppose that's difficult. But what advice do you give to people concerning when to go or when not to go? Well, it's always tough, right? We always encourage people if they're worried or sick or don't know what's going on to come get checked. There is some balance there with, if you're younger, healthier, and not struggling, to breathe or not having chest pains, that sort of thing. If you have a virus, there's probably not much we can do. But, it's hard for people to know the difference sometimes. And we I guess would say we always try to err on the side of caution. Fair enough. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Jolene is giving us a buzz. Hello, Jolene.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Good. I have a question about esophagitis and esophageal cancer. So my father-in-law passed away almost 12 years ago from esophageal cancer. And at the time, he had done a study with a doctor who's no longer here in Halifax. And my husband and his sister were told that they should continue to get scans just to ensure that things were going well because they both have heartburn. Their heartburn is treated. So they did get a scan back 10 years ago. My husband did have esophagitis. It was treated, and they did a scan, I believe, a year later, and things were okay. He does also have a hiatal hernia. So again, with the surgeons, he said that he should get a scan every 2 years. My husband and his sister, and they are no longer allowing my husband to get a scan. So his last scan was 8 years ago because they are too busy. So I know this isn't necessarily a question that you can answer, but have you heard of this happening? And is there any suggestions as to how we can go about potentially getting another scan just to make sure things are okay?
Yes, there's a couple things here. What kind of scan are you referring to?
It's the scope that goes right down into the stomach.
Okay, so an upper scope, yeah. Sorry, scan in my mind is an MRI or a CT scan.
Sorry.
So you're talking about an upper endoscopy. So I guess the first thing is who's saying no? Is it a gastroenterologist that has seen him before that is now saying no? Is that what's happening?
Well, so our doctor had put in a referral, and we've done that over the last 8 years, probably about 5 times, and he's been denied to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little strange. I mean, without knowing, to whom they were referred, it's a bit of a tough question to answer. I think my general suggestion would be try somewhere else. There are, there's not great scanning to replace an actual scope going down and take a look. So that's probably your best bet at this point, is to have your doctor send a note to another person who does scopes and say, look, we were told we need to keep getting this done, that it hasn't been done. Can you please do it? That's probably the first place to start. If you really get stuck, I mean, there are some private clinics in Montreal that do upper scopes quite quickly and easily, but there's a cost associated there, of course. So it depends on, sort of the risk and the need and what answers you get back, perhaps, when you ask for a second opinion.
Okay. And is it only Dartmouth and Halifax that do these scopes? Do you know?
No, they do them all over the place. Yeah, all over the province.
Okay. Okay, well, I appreciate that information. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
Have
Good
a nice
luck.
day.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for house calls with Dr. John Gillis. Again, 902-405-6000. When it comes to backlogs and specialists, you talked about, I think it was neuro last week or the week before, you said it's 8 years. This is frustrating, right? When it comes to people and getting scans and getting specialized medicine, Dr. Gillis, it's got to be frustrating, I'm sure, for patients first and foremost, but also for you and other doctors who are trying to refer patients to get scans and scopes and see specialists. It's got to be a point of frustration, I would think, for everybody involved.
No, it is. It's, you want to be able to do your job. And, you've heard me say many times, this balance here. There are a lot of unnecessary referrals that get sent in for things and that backlog things. But, for things that, genuinely need to be seen, we're still waiting for crazy amounts of time in some cases. And, that is very frustrating. And, it's people's well-being. But in some cases, bad things happen. Things get worse. Things get missed. And, nobody likes to work in that environment. At
what point do you think that you mentioned a private clinic as being an option? At what point do you think people should, and I suppose it would vary depending on everybody's situation, financial situation and whatever, but are there any rules of thumb when it comes to when people should look to outside of the public sphere to get these types of scans and scopes done?
Yeah, I mean, we'd ideally like that not to have to be the case, but if there's no other option and, the need is felt to be there, sometimes people, consider it and do it. I mean, we see it, have for years with, MRIs and, back and neck imaging. People are waiting and they're suffering and, sometimes it's worth it personally and financially, even though, again, it's not the ideal. But, if you're suffering and you're worried and all those sorts of things, sometimes it does merit consideration.
Is there any rule of thumb or any advice when it comes to whom you pay money to get that done because you want a good quality scan and like anything, right? I suppose it would vary on who's doing it. Can people do research? Are there reviews on these clinics?
Yeah, I think yes. I mean, the short answer is yes. You'll see reviews. I mean, people commenting on the level of service they received and the quality of things. I mean, for the most part, the quality is there, but doing a little bit of research and reading some reviews is, probably a wise thing in with anything we do. For sure.
Sounds good. All right, stick right there. House calls to Dr. John Gillis. If you have a health-related question or concern, give us a call at 902-405-6000. Dr. Gillis with lots of experience and knowledge to impart upon you. 902-405-6000. House calls continues when we come back. House calls continues with Dr. John Gillis. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. If you have a health-related question or concern, give us a buzz at 902-405-6000. Dr. Gillis, this story, again, while we await some calls, off the CBC website, an official with Nova Scotia Health Department says the province wants to get back into negotiations with the federal government on a pharmacare agreement. Stacey Burgess, Executive Director of Clinical Care and Delivery, made the comments at a meeting of the Standing Committee on Health at Province House yesterday. Quote, Health Canada is aware that we want to come back to the table for further discussion, so we're waiting for the invite, she told reporters following the meeting. She said she couldn't provide any details about past negotiations. She isn't directly involved in the work. The Trudeau Liberal government passed legislation last year for a universal pharmacare program. However, since health care falls under provincial and territorial jurisdiction, each province and territory must sign an agreement with Ottawa to tap into the program. Dr. Gillis, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that we need more of a sense of urgency, or is it complex, and do you get why it's taken time, or what are your thoughts in general on this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of layers, some of which are structural, some of which are political. I think it's, with the new government in Ottawa, I think there's some will to move some of these things along. As governments age, they tend to develop a little bit of inertia, and there seems to be things happening in Ottawa. So I'm hopeful that, this will get done and it'll catch up to where it needs to be.
All right. So, look, costs are one thing, but some would obviously suggest that it's an investment. If you have a healthy society, a society that has the medication that it needs, you're in turn going to that'll manifest itself long term. But it's a long game as opposed to the short game. And we know the electorate sometimes is impatient when it comes to spending and these decisions. So do you feel as though that getting a public buy-in is imperative here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that if people aren't on board with what's happening, then the system's not going to work. So, I mean, that's a matter of communication and education. And again, hopefully, as this process evolves, we'll get there.
Do you have some concerns that it might be politics, political cousins at play, conservative PC government here, Liberals in Ottawa? Is that potentially at play?
That's always possible. I think there seems to be a pretty good mood and rapport generally right now, and hopefully that will carry the day and they'll get the stuff done.
Yeah, for sure. Tim Houston is definitely, I would say, certainly a red Tory, and that's probably being generous. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000, that is the way to reach us for house calls with Dr. John Gillis. Again, 902-405-6000. Jay's giving us a buzz. Hello, Jay.
Hey, good morning, guys. How you doing?
We're doing well.
Good. First-time caller, long-time listener.
Great.
Question for Dr. Gillis this morning.
Sure.
I am a flight attendant and have flown many years, and question that every time I try to avoid to fly with a head cold, but if I do, with my sinuses, the left side of my face goes numb. Is that normal?
You said it goes numb?
Yeah, it's almost like it goes pins and needles from probably cheek line up to my eyeball. Is that just pressure affecting the nerves?
Normal. I mean, have you had that investigated? Have you had your sinuses x-rayed or scanned just to see what's going on?
No, I've not done that.
Yeah, and you have a little bit of inflammation with the pressure changes. It affects, one of your sinuses, not the other. You may want to talk to your doc about it as to whether you need a decongestant when you fly or a nasal spray. And, if it's getting worse or not changing, you may need some imaging to see what's going on in there.
Okay. Cool. Just called to check. Thanks very much.
All right. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's what it reaches. Flying and that air, that processed air can be problematic when it comes to your health. Dr. Gillis, can it? Or what are your thoughts on people who fly all the time, in particular people who work in that industry?
Yeah, I think people working in industry get pretty used to taking care of themselves. I mean, it's shift work. It can be long hours. You're in a tin can with lots of people who, may not be, doing what they should do and flying when they're sick. So, I mean, I think, getting rest and, making sure that you take care of yourself seems to be the norm with most flight attendants, but they get pretty used to it. They're pretty professional at what they do.
Yeah, and if you're sick, of course, and you got to fly, wear a mask, right? Wear a correct mask, and that goes without saying. If you're sick, stay home. But if you have to be amongst people, then wear a mask. You've often said that, and it's worth repeating, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you have to work and you're unwell, I mean, I don't know what the airline's policies are. I'm pretty sure they don't want, sick flight attendants, in that tight environment with other staff and passengers. But, I do occasionally see a flight attendant with a mask on, and it's precautionary, but, it's also something that passengers should do as well. And, I think some people are very diligent, and, I see people hacking all over the place all the time, not wearing a mask on the plane, and I, wish they would.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, fair enough. All right, folks, listen, if you have a health-related question or concern, give us a call at 902-405-6000. Dr. Gillis has a lot of experience, decades of knowledge and experience, and is willing to give you a hand, or if he can, on the phone, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for House Calls with Dr. Gillis. Again, 902-405-6000. House Calls continues when we come back. All right, it's House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. Give us a call at 902-405-6000 if you have a health-related question or concern. And Dr. Gillis is standing by, awaiting your call. We get open lines for you folks, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for House Calls. Again, 902-405-6000. Dr. Gillis, from time to time we talk about Lyme disease on the during the hour, and this story is on the CBC website. And the headline is, how close are we to getting a vaccine for Lyme disease? Many thousands of Canadians have been infected with the tick-borne illnesses. What, to your knowledge, advancements are being made when it comes to treating Lyme? And perhaps let's talk about Lyme, because it is a high-risk time of year, not to fearmonger or to cause anybody any unnecessary fear about Lyme, but what, to your knowledge, is on the horizon when it comes to treatment for Lyme?
I mean, we start with prevention, trying to, keep yourself covered, make sure you don't get bit, or, if you're out in the woods or in the field, inspect yourself and make sure you don't have ticks. Not all tick bites lead to Lyme disease. And, finding the balance is a challenge sometimes. Some people, think they need antibiotics anytime they get bit. That's, not true. The tick needs to be there for an extended period of time. It has to be the right type of tick. So we try to find balance in that, not just putting everybody on antibiotics, watching for a rash, watching for symptoms, but also, not wanting to miss it, knowing that it can cause a lot of problems for people. In terms of vaccines, there was one that was taken off the market because, I don't think it had much uptake. People weren't buying it. It wasn't, maybe felt to be as big a deal at that point in time. Mm-hmm. So, we wait again. Looking at the Center for Disease Control website, there are some studies happening, that are in trial right now. There's a shot, an antibody shot that's under development, and there's some different things happening. But ultimately, it doesn't seem logical that if there's a vaccine that did work, is it money? Is it was it found to not work as well or be unsafe? I haven't seen anything referencing that, but yet here we are without the vaccine.
Yeah, for sure. And is it elusive to try and find a vaccine for this type of issue? Is it an evolve? Do the ticks evolve in what they do and how it produces Lyme, or I would think that any type of disease like this would be a bit of a moving target.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little different than a virus, so it doesn't change as much. So the evidence is ongoing, the work is ongoing. I just I don't really have a good sense of why this hasn't moved more, and maybe we're more aware over here just because we have recently such a tick problem. But I do hope it moves along.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. Scott, hello.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
Doing well.
Dr. Gillis, I just have a quick question for you. I have severe COPD with emphysema, and I'm on medication from my specialist, Daxin. I take once a day, Brief Tree, and of course my ventilator. But I'm seem to be deteriorating quite quickly, and I'm almost ready to go to the merge. I check my oxygen levels, heart levels daily. When I wake up in the morning, I feel okay. I'm not sleeping well. I don't get a lot of sleep because I'm more like sleep desperation. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not sleeping a lot. When I get up, I'm completely fatigued, hard of breathing, and my specialist said I get about 30% lung. My oxygen levels were at 72 this morning with a heart rate of 145. And then when I relax and after sitting down again, I can get my oxygen levels up to still flashing at 91, heart rate, drop to 124, 125.
Yeah, do you have oxygen at home?
No, I don't.
And have you had that conversation with your specialist?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a number of things here. If your oxygen is truly in the 70s, if that's an accurate reading, you probably should be in the hospital, getting some oxygen and determine what's causing it to go down. You probably need to be reassessed by the specialist to see if there's any other tweaks that can be made with your meds, or if there's something else going on. And you may need to start having a conversation about home oxygen if you're persistently that low.
Because I'm constantly coughing and spitting up a lot of mucus. It's getting really bad, uncontrollable at times, right? So I don't know if I got an infection again. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, all of those things are possible, and sometimes, people with bad COPD get low-grade infections and they need antibiotics. And the only way to properly determine that really is a chest X-ray or other imaging. So, sounds like you've answered your own question. You probably need to go get yourself checked.
I need to go to the hospital then, probably.
Think so.
All right. I think so. All right.
Okay,
Thank you,
Scott.
sir.
Good luck. Take care, pal.
Take
Okay, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Is oxygen at home? I would assume that wouldn't be covered by any provincial drug plan, or perhaps maybe depending on your financial situation, Dr. Gillis. What about the finances of oxygen at home?
Yeah, it's usually covered for people with relevant medical conditions. There are some caveats to that. I mean, we see people that aren't on home oxygen because they're still smoking. It's putting someone on oxygen when they're smoking isn't that helpful, but there's also a risk when you're around pure oxygen of, lighting something on fire, because it's, tends to lead to more flammable stuff. So there's some risk there. But yeah, it's commonly used, but when it's getting that bad, that may be the answer.
Absolutely. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. And let's see. Let's talk to Janet. Hello, Janet.
Good morning, guys. How's it going? All right, I hope.
Well, we're okay.
Okay. I got a pacemaker about 3 weeks ago, and I'm really, really out of breath. Is that normal for that?
No, I wouldn't say it's normal. I mean, if that's a new symptom since you got your pacemaker, have you been rechecked since you received it?
No, I was to my doctor yesterday, but she didn't say a whole lot. She just said to book the recheck for the clinic.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things that could be happening. I mean, it may have nothing to do with your pacemaker. It may be that the rate is not set where it needs to be, or that it's not capturing. Sometimes that happens. So, if you're feeling worse after the pacemaker, that clearly would not be the intent. You probably need to speak to the cardiologist or the pacemaker clinic and, have it checked just to see, what in fact is happening.
Okie dokie.
Okay, good luck.
Have a lovely day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. For house calls with Dr. Gillis, again, 902-405-6000. And a reminder, of course, we will take your calls between noon and 1, your general calls. But in the meantime, again, more calls with Dr. Gillis, 902-405-6000. House calls continues when we come back. All right, continuing with house calls, 902-405-6000. April's giving us a call. Hello, April. Hi, April. All right, we'll put April on hold and go back to her, 902-405-6000. Corey, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Going well.
Good. Question for Dr. John.
Sure.
So my son was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma when he was 7. He's doing well now. He's 10 years old. But during the treatment process, we're told that he developed avascular necrosis in and around the left knee from treating his left femur. Now, we know this a couple months post-remission. He's developed discomfort in his right knee. And my wife and I, in talking to each other, we assume it's due to overcompensation of some kind. I guess my question is, how can I assess the knee as a parent without running to oncology to have some scans done and tying up that system? Is there any type of physical assessment that we can perform to see if it is just a sprain or a strain?
Well, I mean, your family doctor can do that. That could be done at the Emerge or what have you. A physiotherapist could probably do that for you as well. The question with that history is, are you going to want some imaging? Are you going to want even an X-ray of the knee as a starting point, just to see what's happening there? So, typically I would filter that through your primary care doc to get the matter started, and then go from there to see if they feel that more is required. But those are some of the principles. Yes, you can they can do an exam to determine if it's soft tissue, but with that history, you want to make sure there's not any sign of changes in the bone on that side that might indicate a recurrence or something like that. It's probably unlikely, but you obviously don't want to miss that.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I guess I'm trying to handle it at our level initially, if I can. I have no problem escalating it. We've had to do it in the past, but I don't want to feel like that crazy parent who just runs in every time my son has an ache or a pain. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying does make sense, though.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked about this earlier, and it's when we say it's probably nothing, that likely is the case, but you don't know for sure. Now, again, in the absence of that history, if your kid gets kicked in the shin and their shin hurts, it probably hurts because they got kicked in the shin. You're probably not going to need to run to the hospital. But with a cancer history, I would tend to err on the side of caution there, and I don't think that makes you, inappropriate. I think you're just being diligent, and if my kid had cancer like that, I'd be digging into it as well.
Okay. All right. That makes me feel better. Thanks for your time.
Okay, Corey. Take care. 902-405-6000. April, hello.
Hi, how you doing today, Todd?
Doing well, you?
Very well. I have a question for the doctor, if I may.
Sure.
I'm nervous. My first time calling.
Okay.
Thank you. My husband is a family of 11 brothers and sisters. 5 have died of cancer from the ages of 38 to 51. He asked for a CAT scan because of the cancer all around him. He got it. He has a nodule on his throat. The doctor said they'll look at it again in 1 year. My question to you is, my husband's not very comfortable waiting a year. Do you think that's reasonable?
Probably not enough information for me to answer that. When you say throat, do you mean thyroid? Do you mean neck? Do you mean actually in the throat, like where the tongue is?
Nodule on his lung. Sorry, sir. There's a nodule on his lung. Yeah, and he's non-smoker. Never smoked. Yes, and he's lost 5 brothers and sisters all around him. And he's just wondering, like, why am I still here? Kind of thing. But he has been diagnosed 2 weeks ago with a nodule on his lung. And the radiologist said, we'll look at it in a year. And he's not happy with that or comfortable with that. Do you think that's a reasonable amount of time to wait, sir?
Well, generally speaking, yes. And I'll explain why. I mean, I see a lot of imaging, ultrasounds, CT scans, X-rays, MRIs that, find things that are, obviously concerning. But very often we find things that look benign, have certain features that the radiologist would be trained to say this is almost certainly benign, and that's how they come up with their algorithms in terms of follow-up. Is it 6 months? Is it immediate? Is it 2 years? So we see a full range of that, and I see that all the time.
Okay.
All sorts of different types of testing.
Okay.
So that's not abnormal. That is based on lots of research, lots of data, how big something is, where it is, what it looks like. I see thyroid nodules all the time, and they have a very strict criteria for how big they are, whether they need a biopsy right away or not. And so the process is to follow them along. If something were to change in terms of symptoms, he's having lung problems, coughing up blood, stuff like that, if something were to change, that would definitely be a reason to get reassessed. I don't know exactly what they saw, but what you're describing to me is, not uncommon, and I would say fairly the normal way we follow things. Some imaging is like, holy shit, that's really bad. Some is like, there's nothing there, it's all benign, you're good.
Okay.
Some of it shows this sort of thing. That's probably nothing, but it's double checking.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. The doctor said that he wouldn't even known it was there, but he asked for the test, and because of the cancer in his family, he was a candidate to wait for it, and he got it. So, okay.
I'm glad it was checked, and I hope it continues to go well.
Okay, April. Good luck.
I love the show. Thank you.
Thank
love
you.
The show.
All right, take care.
Bye.
902-405-6000. Here's an email question from Don. Don says, while in the process of getting a health directive, personal care directive for an elderly relative, my lawyer said that a doctor's certificate confirmation was required. So it has two questions in relation to that. It says, how much doctor's time is required to complete the document? And is this the best use of doctors' time given the severe shortage of doctors in Nova Scotia and Canada? That comes from Don.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough one. I mean, usually people can sign their own directive if they have capacity. If there's a question of capacity, then you may need a doctor to be involved. I can't say that I've seen anything like that recently, but not sort of the field I would typically work in. So, that's probably not a very helpful answer, but I guess trying to find out why that's required and get a little more information would be helpful.
But to its point, paperwork and getting bogged down with paperwork it's a part of a doctor's life that is difficult because of obviously it takes time, right? And the administrative burden. And you often talked about workers' comp being one example of an entity that requires a lot of documentation. And this is an aspect of a doctor's life that is a challenge, right?
Yeah, it's frustrating to have to fill out the same paperwork, every year for the same patient who's been on the same meds forever. And, is it individually that taxing? No, but when you have to do it 10 times a day for different things, it is frustrating, and it's not a great use of time. And, they'll say, well, you get paid for it. I'm like, sure I do. But it's, an unnecessary step in many cases, this paperwork, which takes away from time that could be spent seeing a new patient or dealing with another challenge.
For sure, indeed. Dr. Gillis, appreciate it as always. We'll do it again next week.
Take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Take care. Dr. John Gillis, that's House Calls. We do that each and every Wednesday. Now we got some time for you. What is on your mind on this Wednesday? The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. And look, folks, this whole bike lane controversy, if you want to call it a controversy, it's hard to believe that bikes are controversial, but it is in this city, and not only in this city. This is other jurisdictions. This is being played out as well, including in Ontario and Toronto, because as the battle for space on streets goes, so does the battle amongst those who want it. And Andy Fillmore, the mayor of HRM, who will be on the show tomorrow, by the way, at 10:45. He was on the show on Monday. His motion did not pass, in which called for a pause on bike lane construction. And part of the reason that he put forward was congestion. Of saying, and it's in his estimation, his opinion that bike lanes are creating more congestion, which ironically they're supposed to ease congestion. However, not everybody around the council table was convinced, and some believe that without evidence that was not sufficient information or lacked evidence to pass the motion. To me, the number one issue is the cost of these things. Because initially it was $25 million, and most of that was going to be paid for by other levels of government, the federal government. But the cost is now nearing $100 million, and it's going to do nothing but go up. So what are your thoughts on this, folks? Did council get this right, or did council get this wrong? 902-405-6000. The vote, by the way, was 12-5 against the motion. And when after the break, I'll read the councillors who voted for it. And I'll get your take on all of this or whatever else you've got in your mind. The way to reach us, again, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Halifax Regional Council defeated a motion to pause the construction of new bike lanes in the municipality. After a lengthy debate yesterday, Council voted 12-5 against Mayor Fillmore's motion. And look, to nobody's surprise, some councillors, including Sean Cleary, opposed the motion. And Sam Austin, of course, we knew that would happen. During the debate, Sean Cleary said that he's not convinced bike lanes were solely responsible for traffic congestion. He said, I think because we built bike lanes and there's congestion, some people think that one leads to the other. There's no evidence to suggest that that is the case. District 13's Nancy Hartling also voted against the motion, suggesting that it lacked supporting data. Quote, I see no facts here about why we would pause. I don't see how a blanket pause provides nuance to the dialogue. Trish Purdy, District 4, who supported the motion, argued that changes to traffic lanes have consequences. She says when you repurpose an existing traffic lane to build a bike lane, that does impact traffic congestion. Or if you remove an existing right turn slip lane to put in a bike lane, that does actually contribute negatively to traffic congestion. And look, I think that as you take space out of a street, I think that logically, perhaps the assumption could be made, or you could deduce that would create congestion. However, I think to Sean Cleary's point and to Sam Austin's point, is there data supporting it? To me, you could debate the congestion all day, whether or not that creates congestion or what the long-term ramifications are. I think empirically what we do know is that the costs have spiraled out of control in a pretty fast way. And the timeline in which it was to be completed has gotten out of hand as well, because it was supposed to be done, I believe, a couple of years ago now, and at a price tag of about $20 to $25 million. Most of that money was supposedly coming from the federal government. Now the cost, and this is just an estimate, folks, $100 million, you can be rest assured that number is going to go well beyond the $100 million. So to me, the whole conversation should, not the whole, but the crux of the conversation is about the cost and priorities of council and priorities in which the way that they spend our money. To me, that is the bigger conversation, if not the entire conversation. At what point do we have to say, is this worth it to build bike lanes? I mean, look, I'm not against cyclists in any way, shape, or form, and I don't think that there should be, again, one group against another. I really don't. I don't think that it should be marginalized or reduced to a polarized conversation of wedge politics. I think at some point, though, you need to look at it and you need to say we've got crumbling street infrastructure, road infrastructure. We can see it all around us. And there's endless need for the municipalities' taxpayers' money. Endless projects. And at some point, you have to say how much is enough when it comes to the cost of this vision of a connected, contiguous bike network. Because is it $150 million? Is it $200 million? I mean, who knows how expensive this is going to get. Now, of course, the argument is made that the longer you put it off, the more it's going to cost because things are going to get cheaper in the future. We know that. But still, fiscally feasibility is to me is the key issue here. Is this fiscally feasible? And where does this land when it comes to priorities for the municipality, for HRM? So what are your thoughts on this, folks? Did council get this right, or did council get it wrong? Or whatever else you'd like to get into. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Larry, hello. Hi, Larry.
Yes, good afternoon, or good morning. Good afternoon, I'm not sure. So comments on the bus lane. Council got it wrong. Totally wrong. Right now, if you drive in Halifax, congestion is a huge issue. No, there's no question about that. Also, I don't see anybody in the bike lanes. Number one, when they are used, it's mostly in the summer. Number two, the city is so bloody hilly that very few people are going to use bus lanes on a regular basis. So are we spending all this money and making traffic congestion worse, which is without a doubt the case? Are we doing that because we want to satisfy the minority? And not only the minority, but it seems to be a very small minority. Bus lanes work in some cities, and they work in places like the Netherlands. It's flat. Bikes have long been the masters of the road there. Weather-wise, it's pretty moderate compared to what we have, the extremes we have. And that's kind of where I come from.
Why do you say the vast minority or the minority, Larry? Why do you say that? I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way.
On the bus lane, you ever see anybody in these bike lanes when you're driving downtown? I don't. Occasionally, yeah, sure. But if you're in the Netherlands and you're driving, you'll see hundreds, thousands of bikes in these bike lanes. Mm-hmm. Are we going to convince people to use bike lanes? If we haven't convinced them to try it now, I don't know when we're going to.
Well, Larry, look, and just to play devil's advocate here, some would say that if you had a connected group of, or if the bike lanes were connected and contiguous, that would be the game changer, and people would use them because it's a patchwork. That's the reason they're not getting the usage that you would expect. Do you believe that or no?
No, I don't believe that's the case at all. I believe if you look at the amount of people actually using bikes in Metro, you'd find it's a very small percentage compared to some of these European cities that are long been. Well, I get the weather is a big factor. The hills are a big factor. We don't have a moderate climate here. We have huge climate swings. I would be very surprised if there was any more than a handful of people using those bike lanes in the winter. And I drive the city a lot. Back and forth. It just doesn't seem to make any sense to me at all.
Okay, Larry, appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Take care, 902-405-6000. Jeff, hello.
Yeah, good morning. Good afternoon. Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, he said everything I just said, bud. I haven't been downtown since I retired from the city 15 years ago. Down Upper Lake one day, picked up a buddy. It turned on the Wise Road. I said, "What the hell is this?" I couldn't believe I said bike lane. Look at it, halfway out the street.
Look, folks, if some of you out there who are younger and listening to this and you're a proponent of bike lanes, please give us a call. I want to have as balanced conversation as possible. Not to suggest that I don't want everybody calling, because we want all demographics calling as possible and all age people as possible. Mark, hello.
Oh, hey, Todd. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So with bike lanes, I have what I think is a simple solution. And I know that people won't like this plebiscite. Let's have a plebiscite. Let's just do it. We'll have elections. Nova Scotia can oversee it. We'll have a vote online, right? They represent the voters. Let's just end this once and for all. Do we want bike lanes or not? Yes or no? Put it to the people for a vote. Yeah, it might cost. It will cost a little bit to run it. Maybe, I don't know, $1 million, something like that. It won't be close to $100 million. And then just do it. Have a binding plebiscite, and then whatever we decide as voters, put it to bed.
What's your take on it, Mark? Where do you fall on it?
Oh, well, I'm in fully supportive of A.D. Fulmer's position on that, and the 5 councillors that voted. I guess it would be 5, including the mayor.
Yeah.
But it's a democracy. If we're going to be a democracy, let's put it to a vote. And I fully believe that if they put that to the vote, that the vast majority would vote to yes, end this bike lane nonsense once and for all.
Why do you think? Why do you think the majority of council is not in agreement with what you're saying, Mark? Why do you think that is?
I think you'd have to ask them, to be honest with you. I was pretty surprised by the outcome of that vote. I thought it would probably be overturned. I know that, the cyclist lobby, and this is not denigrating them. I mean, they are very strong, okay? And politicians are often beholden to interests, as we know. So, you'd have to ask the individual councillors. I don't know. I mean, I was shocked that it was 12-5.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate the call.
Thanks, Todd.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
902-405-6000. All right. 902-405-6000. Dr. Gillis, you had something you wanted to pass on that you didn't get a chance during House call, so I want to give you the chance.
Thank you. I forgot, but I think I mentioned it last week. Next Sunday, the 22nd, at the Wanderers Ground, big day of rugby. The Eastern Admirals against Alberta, a women's 7-a-side game. And then the team that I run, the Atlantic Privateers, against Ontario on a rubber match for the anchor of the Coast to Coast Cup. So if you're looking for a fun day out on Sunday at the Wanderers Ground, it's free for students and kids, $10 to $20 at the door for adults. And there are some private boxes and such available that you can note online, Privateers Rugby on Instagram or Facebook. And hope to see some people there. I'll mention it again next week. But if you're looking for something fun to do, we'd love to see some folks out.
Okay, pal. Thanks. You got it. Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. Quick email from Rob, then back to the phones. Rob says the mayor's motion was simply to pause, not cancel the bike lane projects that have yet to be tendered to see if we are headed in the right direction and examine these incredible cost increases. That doesn't strike me as an unreasonable thing to do. Quite the contrary. It seems to me to be prudent when you're dealing with a project which is 4 times its budget cost. Surely advocates for bike lanes wouldn't suggest we should have bike lanes at any cost. That from Rob. Rob, I would argue with you and say that for some advocates, they wouldn't care how much the cost would escalate to. They would say forge ahead with it no matter what. Some people are zealous in that way. I mean, it's you could throw any number at it, and some people would say do it. So I would suggest that that's the case, and I agree that the motion to pause and not cancel. And look at it and examine it, and the fiscal feasibility long term is paramount. I would agree. I agreed with the motion, but it got bogged down, pun intended, because of the inclusion of traffic congestion as part of the motion. To me, it should have been just simply fiscal feasibility study on this is necessary because the costs are spiraling out of control, and at some point we need to study this. 902-405-6000. I don't think that is irresponsible. I would say it would be irresponsible not to, as a matter of fact. 902-405-6000. Gloria, hello.
Hi, Todd. First of all, go Atlantic Privateers.
Yeah, that's right, eh? Sounds like it'll be a good day.
Gillis's team.
For sure.
You had to be rugged to play that game. That's why they call it rugby, I guess. Anyway, about yesterday's meeting, first of all, Todd, the parade square was full of cyclists. Mancini, Morse, Clary, Austin, and White were all out there supporting them. How many people were out supporting the mayor? How many people came to council to support the mayor? I didn't see one soul. But let's turn the tables, Todd. Let's fill that parking lot tomorrow with people who are unhappy with the transit, or the homeless and hungry, or the people who'd like for their kids to be able to play sports and can't because they've got the recreational costs so high. And you know something? They'd be scurrying like rats to run for cover like they did when the library fiasco was on there. They all hid. They were on vacation. So now let's move inside. You know, I watched the whole debate, never missed a minute of it. And you know something, Todd? In my mind, some of them didn't even comprehend what the message was all about. You know, it's my understanding that we just heard that the cost had escalated so high. So if the word just came out, Becky Kent and Sam Austin, why didn't they deal with it at budget time? How could you if you didn't know what it was? And then Kent making the remark about the mayor. I was here at budget time when you were on vacation. What did that have to do with the motion yesterday? You know, they're out. Listen, you know, they don't want to hear the story. They don't want to hear the cost. They have their minds made up. And the other part of it, Todd, they're still stinging because their buddy Mason didn't get elected. I see through all that. I've been over there. I know what they do. And there's also intimidation on that council. They tried that when I was there. How far did they get with it? You can guess. But there's intimidation there. And there are some of them on that council who can't even project their voices loud enough that you can hear them. They're mumbling, they're grumbling. They don't know what they're talking about except that they're against the motion. I felt sorry for the mayor because, and hats off to Hensby and Trish and Gillis and Young for having enough brains to see the real story and understand that it's only a pause. And as far as red lights and they say there's no data, all you have to do, go down the Wise Road where there are 4 of them, and you'll see how long you wait in traffic, where somebody now is out front waiting to make a right turn and they can because there's a bicycle lane there. All you need is common sense. You don't need anybody to write it down on a piece of paper for you or show you a picture of it. You know, and it doesn't cause congestion. Baloney. You know, I just shake my head and I thank God for one thing, that I'm not on that council with that bunch. So anyway.
Okay, Gloria.
Have a great day.
All right, take care. Have to get a chuckle out of that. 902-405-6000. Joanne, hello.
Hi, how are you this morning?
I'm well, you?
Great. I don't live far from where you guys are, and I have a story, and it's a story that really, really upset us. My daughter left our place, went down Gladstone Street, turned onto Almond Street probably about a month ago. And have you ever seen all the buildings that are going up there where Acadian lines and them used to be? I mean, there's hundreds of new people like moving into the neighborhood. Yeah. But in particular, 6100 Almond Street, this guy, like you have to come up a little ramp and then you have to make a little right turn to get out of the parking lot. And there's a brick wall there and there's a tree that's in full bloom, which still doesn't make any sense for what this guy did. He came out of there and you have to give your car a little bit of gas to get up that ramp. He went over the sidewalk. He went over the bike lane, and he hit my daughter's car side on the passenger side. The car was written off, and our 5-year-old child was sitting in a car seat at that back door. And you talk about nervous and scared. There was no bikes or anything around. But, I mean, people are just, like, I don't know who in their right mind came up with putting a bike lane on Almond Street. Like, that street is so busy. And, like, there was a guy on there the other day, Colin, saying, like, he tries to make a right-hand turn onto Windsor Street. I've seen sitting there at least 2 lights to try to make a right-hand turn, because you're not allowed to make right-hand turns now on red lights. And if you go downtown there by the YMCA and that, and you're coming up, I think it's Sackville Street there, and you turn onto Bell Road, you have to come out into the other lane in order to make that turn. Whoever invented those concrete barriers that they have there, they should have only been maybe half the size of what they are. There's no reason why those things have to be that big. And another thing, too, if you're coming down Almond Street, if you're coming down a Grigla Street and you got to turn right onto Almond Street, I think they've done something there because it seems to be a little easier to make the turn there now. But that was another place that was wicked to make a turn. And we're only driving a small SUV. We're not driving a bus or we're not driving a big truck or anything like that. And, like, I go down to South Street a lot to pick up a friend. And usually from here to her place, I can do it in about 20 to 30 minutes if there's no traffic. The other day I went and picked her up. By the time I got her down, went and picked her up, took her up here to do an errand and got back, and she was only in doing her errand maybe 3 minutes. 1 minute and 53 seconds I timed it on my watch. Like, I couldn't believe that's how long it took me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the traffic is ridiculous. And I go out to Bedford twice a week, and I find the traffic out there is crazy too. Like people, when they're driving in traffic, they get aggressive, and then they kind of lose their mind, and they want to do things just to get wherever they're going.
Mm-hmm.
And like I can't tell you, I don't think I've ever seen a bike on the bike lanes on the Bedford Highway. I've seen a couple of people walking, but never a bike.
Mm-hmm.
And like my daughter was saying the other day too, and I kind of agree with her. How many buses a day go down the bus route, those bus lanes that they made? And they're quite wide in that. And, like, there's lots of times, more times than I do see them, there's no buses on those. Why couldn't they have a bus lane and a bike lane in the same thing? Like to me, that would have been, like, they took those lanes anyway, and they're quite wide and stuff like that. And, I mean, like I said, I don't see buses driving in those lanes. I don't take the bus anyway, but I don't see bikes driving in those lanes, like, for the amount of money that was spent on them and the amount of room that it takes off the street from people driving, they're not being accessed enough. And, like, we pay property taxes, we pay insurance on our house, we pay insurance on our car. Like, you know, like my daughter, like, yeah, she got some money back for her car, but it wasn't enough to pay for her to get another car that was going to be decent.
Right.
And I was coming down Summit Street there last July, and I'm going straight. And I went to stop there at the lights there by the museum, and that turns to go up there by the Veterans Memorial Hospital. I'm in the right-hand lane going straight, minding my own business, beautiful day. I heard this noise. I didn't know what to do. I grabbed onto the wheel of the car with my might, and I looked, and there's this big black thing on the side of me. And I looked, what the hell is this? Some guy decided he's in the turning lane, but he wants to go straight, so he just cuts me right off and sideswipes the whole side of my car.
Wow. Well, Joanne, listen,
you're
on a roll, Joanne, but I'm out of time. I got a boogie.
Yeah.
I think we get your take on it though. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Scott, hello.
How are you today?
I'm well, you? Hello? Scott, are you there? All right, put Scott on hold, go back to him. 902-405-6000. Mike, hello.
How you doing?
I'm well, you?
Not too bad. Listen, on the bike lanes, I thought it was a great idea that we were going to take a pause, look at them, and, you know, one of the main concerns is safety. The lady that was on earlier talking about up around Almond Street and that, and she was dead on. I drive a transport truck in the city here. I'm driving a garbage truck now. I used to drive a shred truck. And because of some of them bike lanes, I have to get a buddy out, help her to get out, if I have one with me that day, to go out in traffic and make sure cars don't come up so I can back up and make the turn, because you can't always make it on just one turn. And the way some of them are, it's too tight, or you got a car parked on the side street that is ahead of too close to the corner. So we're having to back up in the traffic and to try to make two turns to try to get into some of them streets. One of the main ones that I've had a big problem with, and I've almost got hit by traffic myself, is down on Hollis Street. Now, on vehicles that are servicing the city, you got the shred trucks going around shredding the confidential paper. You got garbage trucks. It's all down there. The trucks were all designed to do everything from the passenger side for safety for the people that are outside, that no one's out in traffic. You go down Hollis Street, it's a one-way street, and you have this bike lane on the right-hand side. Now, when I was driving for the shred industry, I'd have to park on the left-hand side, get out, walk in the traffic, pull my tunnel out that has the bend that goes up and down, stand there on that side where the control panel is to operate it, and while these traffic's coming down, and we all know Hollis Street has the big 18-wheeler, so now you got me parked there, you have the lane, the bike lane there, and you got a tractor-trailer trying to get in between me, where I'm standing out in traffic, and the bike lane, in order to get down the street. You know, it's someone's going to get hit, someone's going to get hurt seriously in that section alone.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, look, I'm getting tons of emails from people and who are sending me stories exactly like that. It appears as though the planning could be revisited at the very least, right? I mean, look, and that's what the mayor said, is that let's press pause. And let's have a look at the cost overruns, first of all. But second of all, let's look at the planning and the way in which this thing's been designed. And why not have another look at it? Like, what the heck is wrong with that? I don't get why there's this big uproar over and why council doesn't get it that this makes sense to revisit this. And nobody's saying scrap it long term. Nobody's saying end it. Nobody's saying tear anything up. The mayor is just simply, the motion was to pause.
Exactly. I agree 100%. When you said maybe look at moving some of these lanes off the busy streets,
sure,
up a street or two further onto the slower streets, that was a great idea.
Yeah.
That's what should be done. And I don't like to harp on this one, but the vehicles that are being affected, is the trucks and stuff that are going, we're the ones that are paying registration and paying insurance. The bikes that are on there now going, they don't pay any registration fee to have a bicycle.
That's right.
And not only that, and it's not just the bikes. Now we're growing, the city's growing. We have these electric scooters that are going about 40, 50, 60 kilometers an hour down the roads there. Mm-hmm. We got I've seen one guy going on, just sitting on a big wheel with a seat on it there, balancing, going down the road on that, traveling at about 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers an hour. It's becoming more dangerous out there with those, and there's not just pedal bikes and push scooters. We actually got electric vehicles out there going down the road now with these bikes and these electric scooters.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Mike, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Again, this is not about being anti-cyclist at all. It's about being prudent and realistic and doing things that make sense and being proper stewards of this city and having a fiduciary responsibility and not just blazing ahead with ideology at the helm. And that's what's going on right now, folks. Ideology is at the helm. Scott, let's try Scott again. Hello, Scott.
Hey, Todd. How you doing today?
I'm well, you?
Good. I have a hauling business, so my truck and trailer is 70 feet tip to tail, and I have made a conscious decision that I just don't bother going downtown Halifax delivering anything anymore. It's just for the amount that I charge, for the risk that I'm taking, it's not worth it. I've tried to maneuver down through there, and I'm literally where the bike lanes are, where the green things are collapsible.
Yeah.
I'm literally having to run over them in order to get around a corner. And I just said, you know what, this is way too much risk for what I got, for what I have to pay in insurances every year. It's just not worth it for me to. So I've made a conscious decision not to take any loads downtown Halifax.
Wow, that's interesting. And you're probably not alone.
Well, it's just at the end of the day, a load going down there, you might make $400 charge $400 for a load.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you clip a car doing with a trailer just a little bit. Well, it's easily $1,000.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's not worth it. And one other thing I wanted to say about the Nova Scotia Power is I looked into the TransUnion for Equinox, I think it was, the other one.
Equifax.
And I could not find anywhere on there where they would give you free monitoring for 6 years. It was $5 for the first month and $24.95 for every month after.
Well, TransUnion was what was, and there's a code that you got from the letter that you would use.
Yeah, I applied for that one and got it, but there's
no,
two of them in Canada.
Yeah, but
but
Equifax, to my knowledge, they were never promised to, or they never committed to supplying Equifax to anybody.
Yeah, which at the end of the day they should, though.
Absolutely, because there's two credit monitoring agencies that they're reporting. So absolutely, and it should be more than 2 years. It should be at least 5 years.
Yeah,
but Scott, but Scott, like I said last week with the Nova Scotia Power story, is that it would slowly go away, and it really has.
Yep, it sure has.
Yep,
you're right there.
Okay,
it's unfortunate.
It is,
and it's unfortunate that I live on the Eastern Shore, and my taxes are going to pay for something I'll never use in my lifetime.
Okay, Scott, thanks for the call.
Thanks.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Ken, hello.
Hi, you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I didn't realize to come this quick. I'm completely shocked that we can't pause this and look fiscally at what's going on. Like, if you were doing repair at your home and they come back and said it's got to be 4 times more, I think you step back and take a look at it. And I don't see how the councillors do not see that. I don't think they do that with their own expenses. I don't know why they're doing it with ours.
Well, especially when it's not something that's urgent, right? It's not like this is an urgent repair. Yeah. It's not like it's a water main or something like that you have to fix today. This is something that you can press pause on.
For sure. And, we could spend $100,000 or $100 million probably making the transit system a little more efficient, a little more reliable. There's so many other things that would benefit from that money. If we're doing a road repair anyway and we can incorporate a bike lane, by all means. But just a blanket, doesn't matter what it costs, build a bike lane, I don't understand where they're coming from. I think it should be put to a public vote, because everybody I've spoken with are completely against just flat out, don't matter what it costs, just do it. I know very few people that are in favor of spending that kind of money for bike lanes without, doing something else. Like, the road got to be rebuilt, sure. If sidewalk got to be done, do what you can. But just to flat out spend that kind of money just because is not fiscally responsible, and I think council is way off the mark.
Okay, Ken, appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Stephen, hello.
Happy Wednesday, Todd.
Indeed.
Yes, you're 100% right. They should have pushed pause. It costs nothing to push the pause button. It really doesn't, does it?
Well, some would say that if you delay it a year or two, then it's going to cost more because costs are going to go up. That's the argument against it. Which
the costs have already quadrupled.
Well, that's right. I mean, and I don't really buy that argument, because at some point you have to have a look at how much something is going to spend. But like I said, Stephen, I think for some ideologically driven people here and some members of council, that they wouldn't care what the number is. It could be $300 million. They would say do it no matter what.
Yeah, and sometimes I was going to just side mention two things. One, no plebiscites, no votes on stuff. I elected municipal councillors and provincial people and federal people, so I don't have to make those decisions. So I'm not a huge fan, because we'd have a plebiscite on everything. We'd have a plebiscite every month on something that gets people riled up. So, if you don't like it, get a hold of your councillor and tell them you don't like it. That's that one thing there. But the other one is sometimes you go out of band and get one of the councillors on the show that's not on a Monday. Mm-hmm. Is it possible for you to, I won't say grill one of them that voted in favor of it, but try to better understand their mindset behind it? And like, some of them are never going to change their mind, as you say, they're always going to be that way. But what's the mindset in not pushing the pause button? Like, I don't understand when everyone calling your call-in line says, knock it off with the bike lanes for not forever, for a bit. Just knock it off. And it's an outcry. Now, again, as you always say, if you're upset, you call your show. If you're happy, you never call your show.
Yeah, that's right.
So, anyways, I won't keep up any more time from more valuable callers, so you have yourself a wonderful sunny day.
Okay, Steve, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Max, hello.
Hey, so I actually used the bike lane, and I have some points about it.
Okay.
So it does cause a lot more congestion not having a bike lane, because I've seen, from my point of view, just being in a car and being behind a bike and seeing how slow sometimes they go, blocking the whole lane, and that slows it down a lot. And it's also a lot more dangerous with that.
It's more dangerous with the bike lane?
No, without one.
Without,
That's why we need one.
Yeah.
It's a lot more dangerous to not have one for all the bikers, because a lot of the time they go in the middle of the road and it's hard to pass them, and that makes it a lot more dangerous for opposing traffic as well.
Okay, Max, thanks for your input. I appreciate it, pal. Take care.
Yeah, of course.
All right, take care. Let's talk to Kevin. Hello, Kevin.
Good morning. I'm sorry if this topic has been brought up, but on my way to work this morning, I listened to an excerpt on your channel from Sam Austin yesterday at the council meeting, and he made a comment, something like, the sky is blue and the water is wet and bike lanes don't cause congestion. That just baffles me. Yeah, there's places that bike lanes don't cause congestion, but I can name just as many that they cause congestion. Like Rainy Drive in front of the Metro Center has turned into a complete gong show. That right thoroughway that used to be able to kind of stay right and avoid the traffic light and continue down Brunswick Street. That's incredibly congested now, same as Almond Street. And it seems like Mr. Austin is, the entitlement and the arrogance is at another level. It's bizarre that he doesn't, I guess he represents some of his constituents, but he sure as heck doesn't represent the vast majority of them, and to make comments like that they couldn't look at things to make, traffic flow somewhat better.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Is he your counselor, by the way?
No, Catherine Morris is my counselor, and she's of the same mindset as him. She made a comment a couple of weeks ago on your show that, they couldn't, bike lanes are worth the money, and it didn't make any difference what they cost. They're 60% complete, and finish them. And a caller, to their kudos, a gentleman called in, said he lived on the Sambro Loop, and she voted against the Sambro Loop bus, because there wasn't enough people using it. But then they spent millions of dollars putting a bike lane in the Sambro Loop, and that isn't getting used. So it's just like, they have an agenda. There's, Clary, Morris, Sam Austin, just to name a few. They have an agenda, and they're not representing the vast majority of their councillors. They're representing the vocal minority. So yesterday morning, 100 bicyclists show up at Parade Square. Well, while the rest of us are all working, I'm pretty sure we could get more than 100 people who are against bike lanes, or at least against the congestion that some of them cause. Not all of them, but some of them, right? So it's quite bizarre. This city is so backwards, and now we're stuck with these people until the next round of elections. Next municipal election. So we're screwed to get things, back on track.
Okay, Kevin, appreciate the call.
Have a great day.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Fred, hello.
Good afternoon, Todd. I think that the mayor and 5 councillors got it right, and it doesn't surprise me that the others didn't. I think there's a lot of pride in amongst that group, and I think if you said it's $500 million, they still say build it. I'm not against bike lanes, okay? I don't think a plebiscite would be fair to the youth of our city, because we are an older community. But I will tell you this, a pause would have been nice, because from 26 million to 100 million, and that number's going to climb, that's just ridiculous. And there's also there's the cart before the horse deal. They don't have any rules and regulations governing bikes, e-bikes, mopeds, or anything else for that matter, that our HRM police can go after them and say you're doing the wrong thing. I noticed yesterday, I was up in Burnside, they had 20 police officers riding these e-bikes, training on them. So there's a cost of 20 police officers through whatever spring, summer, and fall that we're going to have to pay for, and they're not in the police cars answering more important calls. So pause should have happened, and unfortunately my counselor, Sam Austin, well, I won't say what I think about him, but that's all I got.
Okay, Fred. Okay, thanks for the call. Take care. Alex, hello.
Hi, comment about the bike lanes. It's a good conversation. I just want to put out there how much money is being spent on twinning highways. That has to be exponentially more than these bike lanes, right?
Yeah.
So we've already determined that we're a very car-centric culture, right? So there needs to be a shift away from this. There has to be a lower entry, to get around the city. Right? Not everyone can own a car. Not everyone can even come close to affording a car.
Yeah.
So there's going to be, of course, growing pains to these, car-centric people that are used to driving everywhere. You had a caller call in about a 70-foot trailer.
Yeah.
That's I wouldn't want that coming down my street. Like if you're down on the peninsula, what is he advocating for? That every street can have a 70-foot trailer go down it? I mean, that's bananas.
Well,
right?
Alex, what I think he said was that at one point he made deliveries with that trailer and didn't have any issues on the peninsula, and now it's prohibitive. I think that was his point.
Sure. So that's going to change, right? As you get this densification, you're going to have to find other ways. It's not a commercial area, It's not a 4-lane road that could support a 70-foot trailer. I mean, there's bridges, for goodness sake, that can't take the weight of vehicles, right?
That's true. That's
so,
true.
These are all changes that are going to happen, especially when you're getting to this densification. And I think the adjustment from people being very used to a car culture to some alternative to that is going to be an adjustment. Now, they should reflect on things that make sense. If the costs are getting too high, then, of course, but, maybe another revenue stream is people with these electric bikes. Some of these bikes are, $3,000, around there. Maybe we put some registration on these, electric type vehicles that are going to be using the bike lanes, and keep the pedal bikes free. Yeah. So like I said, there's an option somewhere in there for, a no-cost transportation or very low-cost transportation.
Okay, Alex, interesting point. Thanks for the call.
All
right, take care. Thanks. Didn't get to all of you folks. Very busy on the phone today. For that, I apologize. We will open the phone lines again tomorrow. By the way, a reminder, Mayor Andy Fillmore will be on the show tomorrow at 10:45. So it should be interesting chat to get his take on all of this. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks to Vanessa Van Den Ness on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.